This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Wednesday, March the 13th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly, and David Williams. He's produced the program. Let's go. If you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. So as you heard Brian Medore mention in the newscast, there's not really a whole lot of snow that's fallen this morning, but it is wicked slippery out there. So be careful. Reports of all kinds of accidents all over this region. So obviously slippery conditions and maybe some irresponsible driving as well. All right, very quick note. Boy, young Newhook, man, a 10-week injury layoff, and the bounce back has been really consistent. He's flying out to another point last night, so Newhook is becoming a mainstay in that Habs lineup. Great stuff. And Zach Dean, he's set to become the third person from this province to lace him up in the National Hockey League. He's slated to be in the lineup for the St. Louis Blues as they host the Los Angeles Kings tonight, so fingers crossed Dean is part of it. And if he is, he'll get one of the great traditions. When the rookie or your first game, you get to skate around by yourself. So the team lets you go out by yourself and you do a couple of twirls before they join you on the ice. Let's go, Zach. All right, just a quick note, an interesting one. How do you get your music, Dave? Do you listen to records at home, or are you a CD guy? Probably Spotify for reason. That's why Dave is absolutely. It was on this day last year, worldwide unit sales of vinyl records climbed above CDs for the first time since 1987, completing the only low-tech resurgence of its kind. Vinyl sales topped $1.2 billion compared to $399 million in CD sales. Even more stunningly was the culmination of 17 consecutive years of growth. So on this date last year, vinyl outweighed and outpaced CDs. Pretty good. I enjoy listening to the records. Nothing quite like it. All right. So the RCMP warning of yet another scam. Just, there's a couple of ones that the red flag goes up right away. If there's any engagement or interaction where you're asked to pay some sort of fee with gift cards, it's a scam. So this one is about job posting on the local buy and sell groups. So the fraudsters, they post an ad on social media. They actually go all the way through conducting fake interviews, through the jigs and the reels. They send you a check that's inevitably going to bounce. They ask you to buy some gift cards with the money in the bogus check. A gift card is a scam. So RCMP putting that warning out there on your behalf. All right, let's stick with online for a second. So we know that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador has signed a 2-year, $22 million contract with Teladoc Health, and that's to provide virtual care, virtual emergency rooms. Okay, there's a plan to have some 5 of them here in the province. There was immediate questions posed by the Registered Nurses Union, the Newfoundland Labrador Medical Association, and other domestic providers of virtual care, like Medicuro, Dr. Todd Young. So it's not just about the virtual care itself. The province has told us quite clearly that virtual care is here to stay. There's nothing quite like the gold standard of an in-person assessment, but with so many people without a family doctor, I'm not sure what the options were. But it's without doubt, the NLMA and the Registered Nurses Union, they're 100% right. But here's some questions beyond cost. The cost one is big. How did we land with this expensive contract versus contracts that were about a third of the cost? I'm not sure why they wouldn't have been able to provide a comparable service to Teladoc. It is encouraging that they have to register with the College of Physicians and Surgeons, become a member of the NLMA. But here's one of the red flags that was raised by Dr. Young not so long ago on this show. It's about these types of services, collecting your private information and distributing it to third parties. And Teladoc has a company called, BetterHelp down in the United States. Teladoc owns them. There was a Federal Trade Commission vote 4-0 talking about the fact that they say that BetterHelp was keeping your personal information, giving it to other third parties, consequently get bombarded by pharmaceutical ads and whatever the case may be, based on whatever your ailment was that you sought virtual care. They settled with $7.8 million. So obviously there has been less than best practices for companies that are subsidiaries of Teladoc, but apparently in this province, before we entered into this extremely expensive agreement, we didn't know. So the question would be, BetterHelp, for instance, when the Trade Commission made the ruling, they are barred from collecting and disseminating any of your private information to anyone outside of BetterHelp. Is that part of the Teladoc contract here? It's a pretty important note because everywhere we turn, our private personal information is potentially being compromised or jeopardized. So we cannot have a health offering, even though the Meditech system has already been the victim of a cyber attack. We can't have another entity collecting information and selling or simply distributing it to other suppliers and business relations that they have. So, simple question. Is that clause, barring the company from doing exactly that, part of our contractual arrangement with Teladoc? Be nice to know because that's pretty important stuff, isn't it? All right. Oh, here we go. So I didn't mention it yesterday, and I was asked why not, because it kind of felt like rubbing salt in the potential wounds for our friends and colleagues at Saltwire. Small media markets are in a bad spot. I mean, they just are, small media outlets. You know, the way the world has changed with the advertising dollars, and even though the government went through a pretty ham-fisted approach to try to protect Canadian media outlets on a couple of fronts, the proposed piece of legislation, and of course the concept that people constantly go to is that media is bought and paid for, to suggest that people get clearance as to what they can say or what they can write or print from the federal government because they got some subsidies. It's really not correct. But small media outlets like Saltwire provides, and there are 4 community newspapers in the Atlantic Canada: the Chronicle Herald in Halifax, Cape Breton Post in Sydney, the Guardian in Charlottetown, and of course the Telegram here in St. John's. And they, in addition, have 14 weekly publications in every province in Atlantic Canada except for New Brunswick. So Saltwire has filed for creditor protection. They've got whopping big outstanding debts and the need to reconfigure. They've been accused of mismanaging by one of their largest investors, and so that's where they find themselves. And hopefully this creditor protection can allow them to get back on their feet. We have seen the number of reporters and editors working in these types of media outlets been eroded in large part for quite a long time. Whether or not you agree with what you read, and of course that's not the goal, I would imagine, of journalists. I'm not a journalist, but folks who work in that environment, it's not in an effort to appease or to pander if you're really doing the job properly. So just get a load of this. According to research, between 2008 and 2024, a total of 518 local news operations have closed in 344 communities across the country. Still, 224 new local news outlets were launched during that same time frame, a net loss of 294. Regardless of what you think about the outlet, including yours truly, the fact of the matter is, with the consolidation of media in the country, very much like the consolidation of things like telecommunications, it comes at our detriment. I mean, some of the local stories you need and want covered, regardless if you agree with the so-called bent or not, is in large part irrelevant. Because some of those stories are not going to be covered by the Associated Press. They're not going to be covered by Reuters. They're not going to be covered with the massive organizations out there, the Post or otherwise. It's just not going to happen. So if you think that covering what is local, because everything is local, politics is local, the stories that come from town councils and small pockets of the region or the city or your town, they're going to go by the wayside when small-time media, that's not the right way to put it, when some of these type of media outlets go away, if that's going to be the case with Saltwire, and we hope it's not. So anyway, you want to take it on? We can do it, because I think that those type of media outlets are extremely important. And competing, you know, then the thought is, well, if your business model doesn't work, too bad. Figure it out. Figuring it out, if you're working for the Guardian in Charlottetown in a way to compete with Google or Meta and the some 80% of revenue dollars that are spent in this country on those two platforms, figuring it out sounds like a pretty much of an oversimplification of a very difficult and ever-changing landscape regarding media and advertising dollars. But anyway, I want to talk about it. Let's go. We're told that Uber's coming to town. So, of course, people working in the traditional cab companies, they don't like the sound of it for the obvious reasons. But Uber, in preparation to file their application with the government, is now actively recruiting drivers in this province. You have to have a clean driving and criminal record and a Class 4 license. So, like most travelers, when I travel, I admit, I use Uber. I find it convenient, and not to say that Jiffy Cab's new application isn't convenient, because it is, but if you want to talk about ride sharing and Uber, because Uber's not perfect, there's plenty of warts and plenty of stories regarding Uber's presence in different cities, what it's meant for the local taxi industry, and some other bad behaviors, we'll call it, if not worse. So Uber recruiting drivers. Are you going to be one? Let's go. All right. Yesterday spoke to the fact that we don't really give enough attention to, I think, one of the biggest stories in the province and the country is the decline in math, science, and reading scores. And in this province, we're the worst in the country insofar as the decline goes. So you'll hear from like the NLTA and others talking about the pressures on the teachers, the burnout experienced by teachers, the shortage of teachers, whether it be permanent full-time homeroom teachers, substitutes, IRTs, and otherwise. Got lots of reaction to it. Starting with the absence of public exams and standardized testing. I get that thought. It's a way to measure the level of absorption in the classroom, but standardized testing can be problematic. Some people are good exam takers, some are dreadful. Some thrive, some stress out. So I'm not sure it's the be-all and end-all for measuring where a student is. But those trends and declines are not just because of the pandemic. The trends have been there since 2003. One of the emails that I got I thought was very thoughtful and speaks to some of the larger issues and says clearly it's not a problem of shortages in the system necessarily. It's not about regular budget money coming into the system or technology. This writer suggests it's due to a societal change over a very long time. I think there's a lot to that. Some of the points this person makes. We have expected less from children over the years due to changing curriculum requirements, homework policies, and assessment policies. Now, we at some point could have overburdened children with homework, but children and parents do not place the same value on work ethic, practice, and respect for themselves or the classroom as they did years ago. Children are not completing the work that is required of them. Policy and staff discussions over what to do with incompletes and giving zeros take place. Teachers want to, but they can do very little about absenteeism. Technology and media have made a major detrimental effect on children. Media consumption of video, social apps, TikTok, and the like is what they pay more attention to and what they value, to say nothing of the negative effects of bullying and the use of cell phones and social media accounts. Goes on to say, the classroom is not your grandparents' classroom. The loss of respect, effort, violence, and abuse of students and staff has become the norm. Teaching used to be one of those really secure, well-respected jobs that people were interested in taking on. Then talk about the PISA scores that I've just mentioned, math, science, and reading, on the decline. This is also very, very good. This person here has decades of experience and the academic background to back up the assertions put forward in the email. And not because I agree with them, but I think in large part most people will agree. The standards have changed. The expectations have changed. And when we've lowered the bar, consequently, the effort and commitment and determination has also been lowered. Talking about the scores. This person is a tutor, online, has been for the last few years, has math and reading students from all over the United States. Their math students are 1 or 2 years ahead of our students. She's read through many state curricula, and the topics their kids are doing in grade 4, we're doing in grade 6 or 7. What they're doing in grade 6 and 7, we're doing in grade 9. So yes, by and large, too many students in this province are not able to score 75 and over in what they're taught. And we don't even say that people have failed anymore. We've got this convenient mollycoddled phrase of has not met expectations. So there's a lot to that. Now, I'm not suggesting we go back to corporal punishment, break out the strap and hardline every single person every single time. Accommodations need to be made. Maybe the concept of inclusive education has also hampered the forward progress that we so much desire, but we're not achieving or attaining. So if you want to talk about societal impact on education, because I think there's a lot to that. It's not just about policy set by policymakers and the development of curricula, because they will follow the way that society has gone. We might not be gone in an entirely wrong direction, but I think the lowering of expectations has manifested itself in declining scores. And again, standardized testing, maybe, but I was pretty good at exams, but some of my buddies weren't. And they were every bit as smart as me, not to say I'm smart at all, but I was able to regurgitate. And others can't. And it doesn't mean they haven't absorbed the curriculum, they just couldn't replicate it on exam day. Anxiety, pressure, whatever the case may be. But expectations have hampered our forward progress. What do you make of that? I think it's interesting. All right, let's go to some other interesting things. So Premier Furey has joined with 6 other premiers across the country, and we know that Andrew Furey is the last Liberal premier in the country, and this is about the carbon tax. So Tony Wakeham and the PCs, they're fully aligned with the Conservative Party of Canada on this front in axing the tax in full. Premier Furey is asking for a pause in the carbon tax until inflation stabilises. It's scheduled to be increased by 23% on the 1st of April. So this, again, will be all about the politics of it as opposed to the policy. So I've been told many, many times this morning that this is only smoke and mirrors. He's only tracking which way the wind is blowing. In large part, I think people in this province are worried about price point, are worried about the pressures we face at the pump and at the grocery store. And I think there is every debate to be had about a pause in the carbon tax at this point. Now, the federal government is not going to listen, whether it be to Andrew Furey or anybody else. They're going to go full steam ahead, which might be a political miscalculation, but I don't think the premiers, whether it be from Nova Scotia, Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, PEI, New Brunswick, and yes, here, asking for a pause. Some other premiers, especially out west, they want it gone today, in full, to never return. The question would be whether or not it's working, number one. And if it's not working, what do we replace it with? 2/3 of Canadians voted for a party in the last general election that had a price on pollution. So the conversation's not dead. The go-to now for many has been what the oil companies love, which I think we should not associate necessarily a red flag with it, but consider the fact that if the oil companies in particular are favouring carbon capture, it allows them to continue to produce. Is it something that can work? And at what cost? Because costs incurred by introducing large-scale carbon capture, they're not going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. They're not going to do it with no expense to me and you. That will be borne by us, the consumer. So, who has done the evaluations regarding the cost of carbon capture implementation, whether it be injecting it into the basalt rock formations off British Columbia or injecting it into depleted oil fields here? What does it cost? How effective is it? And who's going to bear the brunt of those associated monies? The answer is me. You. Anyway, Fury's asked for a pause. What do you think? All right, a couple of very quick ones before we get to you. So we know that grocery prices since 2020 have increased by some 22.5%. People point to revenue and profit and greed and the like. Grocery store margins are very similar today as to what they were in 2019. But this one is infuriating. So, more and more retail outlets, pharmacies, grocery stores, and others have implemented self-checkouts. Of course, that's just a cost-saving measure for the company, but what it's led to is a spike in theft. Obviously. So whether people steal because of price point, whether they steal out of desperation, or whether they're just a criminal and the 5-finger discount is their go-to. In a way to combat theft, what we've seen outlets do is read your receipt and look in your bag. And Loblaws has test-driven this particular issue in some 4 outlets in Ontario. You have to scan your receipt to even be allowed to exit the building. So in essence, people are being treated and thought of as shoplifters before any evidence has been brought forward that they've done anything wrong. So it does make people feel like a criminal. Whether or not there's a spike in theft, I would suggest if the companies are worried about that, then hire security. If the companies are worried about that, have people go through the traditional checkout with a human being who scans and beeps your item so that to ensure as best possible that those types of thefts are not occurring at the self-checkout. But here's a couple of interesting notes that you should and could be aware of. Like, for instance, at Costco, you sign on with your membership to allow them to check your receipt upon leaving the store. But this is from a business lawyer. Retailers cannot legally enforce receipt checks or prevent shoppers from leaving a store without evidence of wrongdoing. If they're stopping you and you feel like you don't have the ability to leave, there is no basis for them to detain you. He says that qualifies as false imprisonment. So if someone asks for your receipt or someone won't let you out without checking your bag, you are under no obligation unless they have proof or evidence or legitimate belief that you have something in your bag or in your pocket or down your trunks that you actually stole from the store. So anyway, and fish harvesters, angry protests yesterday. They actually had to clear the gallery at the House of Assembly. We can talk about that concept of free enterprise, how it works. Is there a balance, or is it one way or the other? Anyway, I'll throw that out there. And I did want to get to some investment concerns as brought forward by Charlie Oliver and the concept of bureaucratic inefficiencies. And the Ward 4 results are in the City of St. John's. Tom Davis has been elected to represent Ward 4. It's a good thing. You know, Ian Froud, he stepped away, citing lack of motivation. 4 people came forward to run for that one vacant seat. Now, there's different reasons why we've seen municipal councils be eroded. You know, some it's about toxic workplace. Some of the concepts and the evidence we've seen from Stephenville Town Council, for instance, they had 3 openings, 12 candidates came forward. So with the bad as to why people are leaving council to the good of so many people willing to fill that seat. There's a big conversation therein. So Tom received 1,211 votes. Miles Russell, 657. Greg Smith, 650. Nick Hillier, 272. It will be certified and made official by the city clerk today. But with that wide margin of victory, you can imagine it's Tom Davis. Congratulations to all hands who put their hat in the ring to be elected at municipal, provincial or federal level, and certainly congratulations to Mr. Davis. We're on Twitter. We're VOCM Open Line. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. Nick wants to kick it off talking about Uber. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's begin on line number 2. Good morning, Nick. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. Just a quick one about these Uber drivers. I'm not sure if a lot of people that are thinking about becoming an Uber driver, seeing the recent strike that went across the states and all over Ontario and other places recently, there about 3 weeks ago. Uber drivers don't really make a whole lot of money. And that's the big thing that they striked about. And other jurisdictions, such as Ontario, are implementing what's called a minimum wage for when these drivers are not actually operating. And unless the province is willing to implement something like that as well, these drivers, you're going to make peanuts.
Well, that's up to the drivers. I get it, but
because a lot of people think that this is a great opportunity to make a lot of cash money, which it's not cash. You get taxed on it, and at the end of the day, you're making peanuts compared to what you could be making at a minimum wage job. You make more, actually.
Well, buyer beware. I mean, that's not really, I think, the prime concern for me or potential riders, because I have no interest in a side hustle being an Uber driver. But fair warning in that you need to know what you're getting yourself involved in, right? It's as fundamental as that. If you do your own bit of reading and find out the problems that have been present for Uber drivers in other jurisdictions where it's tried and true, then read and figure it out. If it doesn't sound like it's appealing to you after you figure out what's happened elsewhere, then don't do it. People will do it, though. Inevitably, there's plenty of people here who are going to take on the side hustle of being an Uber driver. And I would also suggest that for potential riders, know what you're getting yourself into. There's a concept of surge pricing with Uber. So on the busy times of day, on the busy days of the week, and whether or not there's a big concert in Churchill Park and people are taking Ubers, you're going to pay more. So there's a surge price. Yeah. There's even fast food restaurants.
Also, the amount of cars, it also goes for the patrons, Patty. The amount of cars that will be available. I like Uber as well. Like you said, when you go on a vacation, you use Uber. I do too. But I mean, down here, I can't see it being a whole lot of cars like what you got in Florida or Toronto, places, so forth. But it's remain to be seen, see what happens.
Well, and plus, if people get involved, they apply, they're accepted to be an Uber driver, they pass the criminal background check and all the rest of it, and clean driver's abstract. If it's not working for them, then they're not committed to do. Actually, I'm not an Uber driver, so I'm not entirely sure, but my understanding is they're not committed to be out there unless they want to be out there. So if it's not working, go home. And if it is working, stay out. And the amount of money you have to pay, and you mentioned they get taxed on it, well, rightfully so. You should be getting taxed on it. It's straight up revenue based on employment activity. So again, if you want to be a driver, make sure you know what you're doing. If you want to be a rider, make sure that you're avoiding surge prices if you don't think that's fair or appealing, because that's a very real thing.
Yeah, another thing too, Patty, I was just going to bring up again, you and I were talking about the carbon tax the other day, and Pierre Poilievre, he actually wants to eliminate it in full.
Yeah.
That's what he said on a news outlet the other day. This is not just partial, but this is in full. So people, if you don't like the carbon tax, get rid of the Liberals, because Pierre Poilievre is walking in town and he's a man of his word so far. Everything he talks about, on his platform of eliminating the carbon tax and trying to get inflation back to normal, I'm all about it. I mean, I was sick of this Liberal government that we got up in Ottawa and somewhat here. Just a lot of the stuff they do is just, I don't know how to get away with it.
You got the cart in front of the horse on that one, saying that someone's a man of their word when they haven't had a chance to implement policy yet, period.
Well, I'm just putting out there, he's calling out Trudeau. He's doing his job. He's calling out Trudeau for everything he does, and everything is wrong. And, to me, that's not putting the cart before the horse. That's actually doing your job. And
no, but you're saying that he's a man of his word, that he's actually followed through on pledges, but he hasn't had a chance to follow through on anything yet.
I never said follow through. I never said follow through on pledges. I said he's a man of his word. He said he'd go after Trudeau when he was in office and he'd get into the House Commons. He'd go after Trudeau and he'd tackle him, and every time he had a sitting. And that's what he's done. Anyways, if I'm talking about the stuff that on his platform, carbon tax and so forth, That's the stuff that I'm waiting to see, and I can't wait to see it all be eliminated.
Are you at all interested in what the alternatives would be to a price on pollution?
Price of pollution,
Yeah.
Paddy. We could pay $1 trillion tomorrow. It's not going to cool the earth down.
That's not the point,
The
though.
earth doesn't.
I don't know why people lean on that as some sort of argument.
The earth does its own thing as well, Paddy. Back in '59, when we had temperatures breaking through the roof just as hot as what we got now, they didn't call it climate change back then. You had never had half as many cars on the road. You never had half as much stuff on the go. So, I mean, the earth does contribute to it on its own. To me, I think it's just the earth going through cycles.
So there's no man-made contribution to climate change, is your
No, just let me finish, Paddy. Man does contribute to it, yes.
Yeah.
But the earth as well goes through its own cycles. So,
But we can only control what we can control.
Okay, well, Paddy, I'll get you to answer the question.
Sure.
How much money is it going to take to cool the earth down? That's the bottom line. Nobody knows.
But that's not the question being asked.
That's
not.
That's what they're doing. It's all money.
It's slowing the pace of the planet heating. It's not about pretending we can roll back the clock.
How you slowing down the earth's heating with taking people's money? I mean, the amount of electric cars that are out there. I mean, half of them are catching fire.
No, they're not.
As you see in the news. Oh, yes, they are.
Half of electric vehicles are catching fire. See, that's where, hyperbole is okay. All right, Nick, I won't talk. You go ahead.
Anyways, I'm just trying to point out, you're ready to blow up about what I just said. Like, I just watched the other day, like, you don't see every one of them, but the other day there was on the news at a Mercedes dealership, a car sitting there idle charging, and the battery blew up. A Mercedes-Benz. And there's other ones on container ships where they got a load of what are these EVs all coming from overseas, and one caught fire and blew them all up. I mean, there's something got to give with it. I'm sorry, but the amount of mining and the amount of waste that comes from these batteries after when they're gone, it's a lot more, if you ask me, than what a combustible engine is.
That's not what is displayed inside any of the research actually done on those conversations. But fair enough, people will think what they think and like what they like. And when we're talking about a tax, then I would suggest most people, when told, well, I can cut your tax, then people like that. Right? No matter what. No matter if they're on side or not. Here's one of the pieces of, just for context. And this is, you can Google this and look at a dozen items right away and find the exact same thing. It was found that there's a 0.0012% chance of a passenger electric vehicle battery catching fire compared to a 0.1 chance for an internal combustion engine fire. I mean, I remember not so long ago when my family had a Chevy that was on recall because the gas tank was exploding. They were bursting into flames. So it's not like it's an electric vehicle conversation only. And if people don't think that man has a contribution to climate change, they can think what they want. But if we're talking about the impact of one industry or another and its impact on emissions and what that means for the heating of the planet, which is not necessarily the conversation, it's the change in the patterns, it's the change in the climate. If we're doing a careful evaluation, and I don't have an electric vehicle, so I'm not preaching to anybody. You buy whatever you want. It's your money, it's not mine. I'll consider it in the future when I think they're more reliable and the solid-state batteries and price point comes back to earth. Looks like it's going to be more competitive in not too far down the road. But the question still has to be asked. If not carbon tax, and fine if people don't like it. I totally get it. Who likes paying taxes? If not that, what? Because if the oil companies get their way, it's going to be carbon capture. And I think it's a fair question. You can tell me whether or not you think this is fair. If they invest large monies, which it looks like it's going to be huge money, if that is the go-to mechanism, who do you think is going to pay for that? Not them. That's me and you. So at some point, we're all paying the piper. There's no free lunch here. So when we do a cost evaluation of one implication, whether it be a carbon tax and or incentives to have clean technology and or carbon capture, at some point, we all pay. This is not done out of the goodness of the heart of the large corporations. At some point, we pay their investment dollars. And in this case, it'll be the exact same. Do we know what the different variances cost? No, we don't. Because what? Political sloganeering is easy. X the tax. It rhymes, rolls off your tongue, and people latch onto it, and so be it. But if it's not that, it's what? And how much does it cost? Is that a fair question, do you think?
It is fair, but at the end of the day, like, an EV vehicle to a combustible engine, there's not much difference in pollution in my eyes. And if they really wanted to push the EVs, like if they says they're that good, Well, Jesus, I mean, I'm looking at a half-ton truck. What do you call it? Ford Lightning. There's like triple the price of a regular half-ton combustible. I mean, it's a bit nuts. They're not putting it out there for people to buy.
But again, like when we say climate change, some people think, well, the only conversation point is carbon tax. And when we talk climate change, people think, well, the only conversation is electric vehicles. But it's bigger than that, right? I mean, it is. That's the easy one because that's something me and you can buy. We're not trying to reduce carbon emissions because we're big industrial emitters. So what's one of the things we can do? We can reduce the cost to heat our home, upgrade our windows and insulation, maybe put in a heat pump, maybe buy an electric vehicle, but that's not the be-all and end-all. Because that's how I think the conversations get derailed very quickly. Climate change, carbon tax, climate change, electric vehicle. When, of course, there is a lot more out there to discuss or to consider.
Well, Paddy, that's like these heat pumps. I mean, when you look at the price it costs to get one installed and what you're planning on saving every month, it really, in all, I mean, it doesn't really save you much.
Well, it has in my home. I can only talk about my bills because I haven't seen...
You might pay lower on your light bill a bit every month, but at the end of the day, the $10,000, you divide that over how many years and then how long your heat pump's going to last. Okay, I mean, you're really not saving that much.
Mini split is what I have. I recovered the cost in full in less than 3 years. And that's even with a spike rate increases from Newfoundland, Labrador Hydro and NF Power. I got my money back in less than 3 years.
Well, all I can tell you is that I had a mini split guy come in my house, and he told me, he said, and he pointed out, because it was a friend of mine. He said, he said over the years you might save $1,000. He said over 10 years, $1,500. So, and that deterred me from getting it. So.
The thing I like about it the most is on those rare, but they do happen, those sultry, really humid days. Boy, that mini split, I'd pay double for it. But anyway, I got my money back on it. I can tell you that much.
I got those nice Costco AC conditioners. You just put one into the window and the little hose, and that can do the whole upper floor. I got a 3,600 square foot house, and I tell you, I got two in my house. My house is down to 19 degrees in the summertime, so that's not bad. And that only cost me $600.
I appreciate the time, Nick.
Anyways, Paddy, you have a great day.
You too, buddy.
And I hope they come out with where he spends all his money for the carbon tax, because yet to be seen where it's going.
You can find a pretty accurate accounting of carbon tax collection.
Yeah, but where it's being spent.
Well, I mean, when things end up in general coffers,
I'd say it's paying for curb or a CERB, whatever it's called. But anyways, you have a good one.
You too, man.
And I'll be talking to you.
We'll see you, Nick. Bye-bye. That was a quick one. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line one. Bill, you're on the air.
Morning, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you?
That's cool. Just getting back on the road. They're horrible, eh?
They are really bad.
Yeah, Paddy, I'm just touching base now. I want to update you on the Long Harbour situation. And just to reference your topic there, let me take you off speaker. Just to reference your topic there about the local media and whatnot, and the grassroots municipality stuff. Right now, the town of Long Harbour is into a few different things, and as I've been pushing for municipal affairs, and more importantly, a magistrate's ruling, more of an individual citizen issue came up recently, and it went so far. They went past the basically a private firm that makes recommendations that's not even recognized by municipal affairs anymore, and they went to an adjudicator. And under the Urban Rural Planning Act in 2000 that was updated, the adjudication process went from, I think it was 6 adjudicators to debate, and fundamentally right now there's 4, and a 5th who's a mayor who comes and goes and just came home, I guess, to do his thing. But if you just don't fundamentally go along with the how they want to do it in this.
Billy, can you give us the specifics of what you're talking about?
The two councillors that were suspended for the maximum penalty for a bogus infractions went back to the table day one, and I'm one of them. Day one, it was already pre-planned, pre-voted on. Suspended again, and like I've been known to say, because the mantra is always, "Oh, we're just volunteers." It's like remuneration means nothing, but for the betterment of the town is my only purpose there. I'm not even going to point out each individual's motivations and whatnot, but there's remuneration is huge. We went back to the table, suspended again by a vote of 4, which is 4 wins and a 7-member council. So 2 councillors suspended again for another 3 months, and they're constantly going. I forget the term it's called, whatever the consultancy that they hired. Actually, in his report against my latest suspension, he even suggested, take it to the Supreme Court. Their response, because of course they don't want to do that. The whole point is like, not an expense the town wants to incur, take the time. It is getting ludicrous out here, and so 2 councillors suspended again. There's another year before an election. False legislation against private citizens who just question their being, avoiding a professional legal judge signing off on checks to get their way. And I know I'm wording this horribly. I guess. I didn't realize it was so stormy. I just got home and I had all the paperwork all lined up last week. But
well, if you need to get your ducks in a row and try it again later or tomorrow or something, we can do that if that's easier.
I would love that, Paddy. I really
okay, let's do that.
Municipal Affairs, look at Long Harbour.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Billy.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, sometimes coming on live is not necessarily the easiest thing to do. Anyway, I'm going to try to get back on track with the breaks here. So, Richard and Mike, you hang tough. Let's check in on the Twitter box. We're VOCM Openline. You know what to do. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. Let's go ahead and take a break. We'll come back. Richard's also in the queue to talk about the carbon tax increase that's pending on April the 1st of some 23%. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 3. Richard, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you today?
Doing okay this morning. Thanks. How about you?
Not too bad. Paddy, I'd like to talk about the increase in the carbon tax coming in April.
Sure.
This is absolutely outrageous to be doing this to the people of Newfoundland and Canada, and Labrador and Canada, because we're an island and we got to import our groceries by ferry or some kind of carrier coming to Newfoundland. And when you see the price of fuels going up, the cost of trucking for across the island or from across Canada to come across the ferry, this just was driving up the price of our groceries. And I don't know why the federal government is doing this, bringing up this carbon tax. I know we're trying to keep the earth clean and we're trying to make sure that down the road there will be a future for the younger people. But, Paddy, to me, I can't see anything in the future that's going to make this world much better, because for the simple reason, we got 5 countries out there. We got United States, China, Russia, Japan, India, the 5 biggest polluters in the world, polluting this earth. They're unbelievable. Don't care. They got no carbon tax or anything trying to cut back the pollution on this earth.
No, but there's no one on the face of the earth adding more renewables than China at the exact same time. And then you look at the price of food, which I think is an interesting study because, the price of food, the groceries has increased by 22.5% since 2020. But if you look south of the border, their food inflation is more stubborn than ours, and they don't have a carbon tax. So I'm not really sure about all of the contributions to the price of groceries, but it's not just one thing, I don't think. And I mean, we can just look to our trading partner, that is the United States. Their food inflation problem is worse than ours, and they don't have a carbon tax. So it might have some impact, and of course it does. To what extent, I think, is debatable.
Well, Paddy, like this country, Canada, we live in, is only a dot on the face of this earth compared to these other big countries. And we're trying to save the world, Paddy. I know their hearts is in the right places, but it's not going to happen, Paddy. Not with all these big polluters, unless they come under one umbrella and start trying to save this earth. But Paddy, for what Prime Minister Trudeau is doing to us with this carbon tax is absolutely unreal, because how can you say to this country, oh, we're going to try to save the world? Well, we're only a little spot on this face of this earth, Paddy, and to me, we're not going to do much unless the rest of them does it.
But that's why I guess there's been international cooperation with things like the Paris Summit. Formerly Kyoto, which we signed on to, we came nowhere close to hitting our targets. Then our country and I think something like 193 countries in the world signed on to commitments to hit targets at Paris with the Paris Accord. So I think there is certainly significant international cooperation on understanding these issues. Different countries, they take different tactics. There are many countries in the world that does have a price on pollution, that does have a carbon tax. We can't do it alone. There's no disputing that. Richard and I wouldn't even try. But the fact of the matter is, we can only do what we can do. We can only control what we can control. We can only hope to be on side with a global community that is on the same page. You're never going to get that type of cooperation with the Chinese or the Russians or the Indians. But what can we do about that? We can't force feed them. But to say that because China does X, even though they're putting more renewables on the grid than any other country in the world, even on a per capita basis, if they're not going to do it, does that mean we all just throw our hands in the air and say, well, that's it? Nothing could be done.
Well, Paddy, like I said, we're only a small dot on the face of this earth, and I think Mr. Trudeau, the Prime Minister of this country, is moving too fast on this, Paddy, because it's putting undue hardships on everybody around this country. And the people in the north, their price of their groceries is outrageous. I know ours is outrageous also, but theirs is astronomical. And for this government to keep moving in that direction at this speed, no, Paddy, they're moving too fast.
Well, let me say this, I guess in agreement in some form with what you're saying, I think a pause is required on April the 1st. I really, truly do. I mean, the province has extended the halving of the gas tax here in this province, but that carbon tax increase will mean 17 cents per litre, and with the inflation rate where it is, and with the interest rate where it is, and with the price of groceries where they are, and the price for almost everything else that we've touched that's gone up and doesn't look like it's coming back to earth very quickly, a pause, I think, is legitimate, and a legitimate request made by 7 premiers in this country, and it should be given careful consideration. It can't be just rejected out of hand, because my purchasing power of my money has been diminished greatly. And I do think a pause. Now, I do think there's got to be some, if people think carbon tax is bad, replace it with what? And what does that cost? And how do I pay for it? I think we haven't had that conversation, but I will agree in full that come this April the 1st, there's every reason in the world to press the pause button, at least until things stabilize a bit.
For sure, Paddy. I agree with you 100%. But, Paddy, there's a lot of litigating factors other than the pollution. Everybody figures that the ozone layer is being depleted. But it's not only the ozone layer, it's the center of the earth. And with all the oil that's being pumped out of the center of the earth, the earth is heating up. The oil acts as a coolant in the earth, Paddy, and it keeps the core. But
the problem isn't the temperature of magma. It's not the core temperature of the planet that's the concern here.
Well, Paddy, how can you explain this, Paddy?
Sure.
There's icebergs up in the north, in the Arctic and the South Pole, probably 50 feet, 100 feet thick, and they're melting. How can this power of the sun melt these icebergs from on top, Paddy? But it's melting from underneath. It's like any lake or pond in the winter. When the water starts heating up underneath, guess what? The pond melts away. Well, this is what's happening, Paddy. They're taking too much oil out of the earth, and they're taking the coolant away.
That's a I don't think I've ever heard anyone make the point or try to make the point that way. The oceans are heating, and that's not me saying it. That's everybody that is involved in that particular arena, including DFO in this country, the marine groups in the United States, off of the European Union, off of South America, off of Australia. I mean, this is well understood that the oceans are heating, and what that means. I mean, even curiously, like we're talking about the protests with the fisheries and what have you. What doesn't get considered, because we're talking about the price of a pound of snow crab, but what we're not really talking about is just about the abundance or lack thereof of certain species that are now inhabiting colder waters away from where we fish, traditionally speaking. So I think the temperature of the ocean goes a long way to that. Talk about biodiversity, the amount of fish in the water, and also what warm water means for the intensity and the frequency of storms, which is obviously very real, that we all know. This is not a new thing. This is not a carbon tax issue. Is when the water is warm, it can absolutely intensify things like tropical storms or hurricanes. So there's a lot to what you just said. I will give you the last word before I have to go. Richard?
Yeah, well, I got one more. I got two things. Try to give me 1 minute, please. Like my example of the earth heating up. Okay, refer to a gasoline engine in a vehicle. If you take the oil of the gasoline engine and put water in there, how long before it burns up, Paddy?
So sorry to say that again.
I say, if you got a gas engine in a vehicle, Paddy,
right,
and you take the engine oil out and you replace it with water, how long before that engine will burn up?
Well, water is not conducive to the operations of an internal combustion engine.
My point. I'm trying to
oil's a lubricant.
Yeah, well, oil also retains heat, Paddy, can hold the heat, and that's what I'm saying about center Earth. But one more thing, Paddy.
Very quickly, I have to go.
Pierre Pauliette, I like to see him in Steveville and Port-aux-Basques, not only just Corner Brook and Deer Lake. We like to ask him a lot of questions about his platform, and he's only every time he comes to Newfoundland, as far as he comes, is Corner Brook. Well, Newfoundland don't end at Corner, Mr. Pauliette.
And nor does Canada end at Cape at North Sydney.
Yeah, well, Newfoundland ends at Port-aux-Basques, so I think he should come to Steveville and also come to Port-aux-Basques to show us his platform, what he got, because all our areas in Newfoundland are big areas for people to run for the votes, and Steveville and Port-aux-Basques is a part of it, and I think he should come to Steveville and Port-aux-Basques to lay out his platform to the people so we can see what he got.
I think a lot of people would like to see an actual platform. Richard, appreciate your time. Thanks for the call.
Thank you, Patty.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Dave, I have no idea where we are. Are we taking a break here, or am I going to the... Did I hit the 45? I can't hear you at all this morning, so... Okay. So, did I hit the 45 break? Okay, so I'll just keep going until the news. Sorry. Let's get this one on one. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. I'm calling because, sorry, I'm really nervous. I have a child with a disability, and through having a child with a disability, I've met a lot of families who also have children with disabilities. And I've come to discover that there's a couple of doctors in our healthcare system who refuses to fill out forms for these parents to get the disability tax credit. So the disability tax credit is for parents to get extra income on their CCB and also a discount on their when they file their taxes to help with expenses that they incur through appointments, or so be it. So I've done some research, and I found a doctor in Ontario who actually advocates for these kids on getting the disability tax credit, and he has successfully filled out a form for a parent, but at a cost of $200 for the forms. Hello?
Hello, I'm listening.
Oh, sorry. I thought I got cut off.
No.
So when obviously that's an expense, but this parent was fortunate enough to get back, because the disability tax credit you can get back upwards of $7,000 a year. So when she finally filled it out, and her child is 5 years old, she got back a significant sum of money that helped her with a lot of expenses that we're all incurring right now, obviously. But it would just be like something to put to the government. Like, why are these doctors gatekeeping something that shouldn't be theirs to gatekeep? Why are they determining that these kids are not entitled? I know the legislation pretty well. So my daughter has Down syndrome. She's been getting the tax credit since she was born because she's entitled to it. I'm going to have issues that other people are not going to have with regards to dressing and feeding. And, you know, some of our babies are tube fed. And it's just not fair that a doctor would block parents from getting this little bit of extra help that they need.
I have no idea. I mean, first thing in the Hippocratic Oath, first, do no harm. So you need a medical practitioner to sign off on your child or anybody's disability, severe or prolonged. And there's a bunch of categories where people could be eligible but have probably not investigated whether or not they actually qualify for a disability tax credit. So has a doctor to your face ever said why they're unwilling to sign off on your child's disability simply on a tax form?
When we discussed it, because it's a couple of parents that had come to me about it, and through conversation as friends. So I sent her a couple of pieces of legislation. So I believe the first thing on, please don't quote me on this, in the legislation is prolonged issues with, and there's a number of categories, feeding, dressing, bathing, etc. Kids with Down syndrome tend to have a delay to which is to so many extents. Like it's not a they have Down syndrome. They're not on a scale. It's not an ability level. Every kid's different. So is every kid with Down syndrome. It's just an extra chromosome. But then, you know, we do go to speech. Like we started speech when my daughter was maybe 6 months old. So that's something that's added to our plate. And we also need certain medications for her, and she gets tubes in her ears and stuff like that. So when I asked the doctor about it, and I said, why aren't you filling out these forms? This is something that can help these parents immensely. Like, they need it. And I said, you're gatekeeping something that's not your right to gatekeep. If they're not entitled, the government will determine that. And I said, just fill out the paper. And she just replied with, it's not one piece of paper, which is... So I'm guessing as an Eastern Health doctor, I don't actually know this for sure, but maybe they can't charge for the forms as a family doctor would. I'm not sure.
What I would do is, like most of these things, it's hard to file a complaint with, say, for instance, the Department of Health Community Services. That would be fruitless, maybe very likely a waste of time. But I'd ask the question of either the College of Physicians and Surgeons and or the Newfoundland and Labrador Medical Association, because they're not only the regulatory bodies and the representative groups. Get answers from them, as you know, from Dr. Farrell at the NLMA. What do you think I should do, Dr. Farrell, when I can't get a doctor to fill out this particular form? And I'd be curious to hear how he reacts. I'd also speak to the college, which is the regulatory body, and ask them, what am I supposed to do with one of the doctors that is registered with you and regulations that are imposed and enforced by you is not willing to fill out a form about a disability tax credit? I'd be really interested to get a reaction from those two entities on that front. I
will, for sure.
Do that.
Thank you for those recommendations. I've spoke to people in government, but it's like just, you know, push to the next. Well, this department will handle that, or this department will handle. You know, you just get tossed around. There's never really good answers.
That's why I take it away from government and I put it in the hands of the umbrella representative group and or for the regulatory body. So try both of those, and I'd be really curious to hear back as to what type of reaction you got from them.
I will.
Do that and let me know.
If anybody does call in to ask any questions, though, and I can email you the information for these parents to get in contact with if anybody needs it.
Sure.
Because our financial situation is so rough, and it's just a little bit of extra help that everybody can use.
There's actually a caller in the queue to talk about exactly this issue. We'll hear from that person after the newscast, but you keep me in the loop with what kind of reaction you get from those two organizations. And if anyone calls or emails with some help, or if you want to share yours, you can do that as well. So why don't you send me an email as well, so I'll have your contact information, which I'll keep private.
Okay.
Thanks for the call. Good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. When we come back, we're going to talk about the privatization highway, some of the ongoing negotiations regarding home care, yes, the pediatric disability tax reform, teledoc, whatever you want to talk about. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the president at NAPE. That's Jerry Earl. Good morning, Jerry. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty, to you and your listening audience.
Welcome back to the show. So sometimes, sloganeering is catchy and can be effective, but this one was right there for all to take. Highway robbery. What are we talking about?
What we're talking about here is, in our opinion, which is just that, highway robbery. What's being proposed or being thought about, at least right now, in transportation infrastructure, as we understand, is taking sections of the Trans-Canada Highway in Newfoundland, Labrador, which we collectively own, and having now a private entity do this, and I'd say lock, stock, and barrel. Not uncommon. This is not about a private entity constructing highways. That has always been the case, not opposed to it, and do great work. But this is going much beyond that. This is a full-blown, what you refer to as a P3, a private-public partnership. And not only for the construction, but what we're hearing, and unfortunately the minister, or fortunately I should say, the minister made a slip at a convention he was at, where work that is normally done by public service will also be part of this P3. So it's basically they will build a highway, they'll do everything from snow clearing to line painting. So I guess, Fatty, when a paint crew would leave St. John's now, which they do, go across the island doing all the highway painting and all the markings that you see, I guess they would lift the paint now for 40 kilometres, drive, and then lift the paint for another 15 kilometres, and the same with snow clearing. It just makes no sense whatsoever.
So just to remind folks, they're talking about twinning the highways, which currently ends around Whitburn, or just shy of Whitburn, 60 kilometres west of St. John's. The new project see the extension about 40 kilometres east to Little Harbour East, 15 kilometres of divided section between Grand Falls, Windsor, and Bishop Falls. They're also spending $20 million to add 15 kilometres of passing lane in the highway leaving Port of Basque. Okay. So they say that inside this $306 million, which is shared by the province and the feds, that all of those things aforementioned, snow clearing, ice management, and the like, would be done to a national standard. Do you know what that means, and how do we enforce national standards? Because sometimes there will be corners cut to, increase profits and revenues. So do we understand what the government means by national standard and enforcement of those standards?
Because there was no dialogue, no consultation with anybody, because the people of Newfoundland, Labrador only heard about this the same as us in NAPE. We were not consulted in any way, shape, or form. Our frontline members who deliver these services every day, as here in Central Newfoundland are doing today while I'm here, no consultation, no knowledge being done in back rooms. We would have not found out about this had it not been the minister making a comment at the convention. When they talk about national standards, what we look at, and we put up a website now, because this is not NAPE saying this is NAPE sharing information from what has been found across the country by such reputable people as Auditor Generals and other organizations, talking about how standards have not been met. And as you just said, how corners are being cut, how ice control has not been as effective. Because, again, you're going to turn a section of our Trans-Canada, the only route across Newfoundland, significant sections, over to a private entity, not knowing what the standard even is. They say national standard. What is that standard? Well, our operators now, when they go out, they do more than one pass on our highways. They go back in most adverse conditions. Would that be maintained, or will they be required to do one pass during a snowstorm? What will the hours of operation? So, again, nobody in Newfoundland, Labrador, Paddy, knows this information, yet this is being cooked up in transportation infrastructure to make a significant change to our Trans-Canada Highway in Newfoundland, Labrador. And this would only be the beginning, I would suggest.
Fair enough. When we talk about jobs, which will also be a consideration, given the fact that there's sometimes a shortage in that field at this moment in time, adding more blacktop means you're going to need, unless we have a real sea change in the type of equipment used and the size of the blades and what have you, there's not going to be any jobs lost. So is that fear allayed by the fact that more kilometers of blacktop means more people required to plow the snow, fix the potholes, install and repair the guardrails, manage the ice? So it's not really a job concern, is it?
And Patty, it's not. Because what we had the foresight, when I first took office, we were in the collective bargaining. We put language in our collective agreements because of what a former administration, especially in healthcare, was going to do. We negotiated language actually that talked about if they were going to go down this road, if Newfoundlanders and Labradorians and governments, whichever government might be, was going to go this path, we built in language that basically said if our members done the work before, they have to do the work. So that's the issue that we will still battle if they intend to infringe on contracts that we negotiate. It's another battle that we will certainly take on with them. But it's not even about that piece. It's about, number one, any time, and most residents of land don't have the time and have to be doing it. We have to do an ATIP to get all this information. It is not transparent. It is not open to people to be able to see. And again, once it goes on the private side, you can't ATIP things that are going on in the private sector that are done by private contractors. That's a problem. We had to fight and threaten to go to court, for example, when you go back to El Science, when they contracted out the management of the service there. We had to threaten to take them to court. We had to go to the privacy commissioner, and we finally got a contract of a management service. So that's what goes on behind the scenes. People in Newfoundland and Labrador have a right to know this is their money, how it is being spent. And actually, Patty, what this does, this kicks the costs down the road 25, 30 years. Now, you or I, most in our age category, wouldn't. Our children's going to have to worry about it. Our children's going to be stuck when all of these P3s start to come to fruition at around the same time. The long-term care, highway, and a number of other facilities. When they come to fruition, it's our kids are going to say, where did this come from? And it's us that's going to make the mistake. And I know as a president of the union, as NAPE, we're not prepared to let these mistakes unfold without at least bring them to the attention of the public and have an hour say on it. In case of long-term care, we can make you say, well, we told you so. Travel nurses, we told you so. Look where we are.
Fair enough. And you're right, we can't get information when it's held by the private sector necessarily like we would through ATIP and government policies and spends and the like. Fair enough. I have one more question for you before we let you go. Yep. So what's going on with the home care operators and negotiations? Because we know that they're paid about $1 more than minimum wage. We know the importance of their work. We've got national conversations happening with aging in place, and that comes with home care support and home care workers and hopefully a required rate of pay so we can keep good people in very difficult roles. So where are we in these discussions or negotiations?
Well, we were at the bargaining table with what we called a group of 20. That's 20 employers that decided to come to the bargaining table collectively along with 23 on our side. You can imagine the bargaining table and more 43 bodies at it. But we represent 24 agencies in total. We've been at the bargaining table with a group of 20. Talks have not progressed well whatsoever. We made a decision to now go for conciliation. We normally don't go public and talk about conciliation because we're doing constant bargaining and conciliation quite often. This is an extremely difficult round of bargaining because, again, we have private entities, yet totally government funded to provide this service. So the responsibility, home care is a critical component in every province here in Newfoundland, especially with our aging population. The Health Accord recognized the value of it, talk about it being a home first policy, because people should have the option, Patty, in Newfoundland, Labrador, to stay in their communities, stay close to their families where they can with the assistance of home care. This is 96% primarily women. They have fallen significantly behind, and the union representing the ones that are organized, we are saying that we are not prepared to have this group continue to be disrespected for the value they bring to the healthcare system, and government and these employers, these profit-making healthcare employers, have to step up to the plate and recognize these frontline workers for once and for all. They don't even have a simple thing like a group insurance plan. Believe it or not, they work in healthcare, and they have very little sick leave. In some cases, little as 2 days of sick leave. So we are not prepared, and we will do what is necessary. We're going to go into conciliation, open, we can resolve the issues, but we're prepared to do what is necessary to get a contract that respects home care workers and the people that rely upon home care workers in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Look, I mean, if we're talking about aging in place, we're talking about people's happiness and dignity and safety and comfort with, their surroundings and their friends and their family close by. But also, not to be cold or callous, but a cost-benefit analysis is probably due here. What do people think the cost is of institutionalizing someone versus the required home support so they can stay at home? I bet you there's a win-win available. I don't understand the abstinence of trying to advance this. It's a national conversation. Susan Walsh, the seniors advocate, has been talking with some of her counterparts about a potential for a tax credit. So anyway, I do have one more that I got to sneak in before we go. With the integration of the ambulance system set to start on the 1st of June, one of the questions still unknown, or the answer is unknown, is what the willingness is of government to acknowledge seniority. Because when you bring in a private offering into the public sector, then all of the years worked does have consequence. Do you happen to know or have any status update about the province's willingness to recognize seniority or years of service?
We have been quite clear in the conversations that we're having. We've engaged in conversation now, Paddy, for 6-8 weeks. We had to push them to get conversations, but the employer was going to go out and announce, in this case, Newfoundland, and basically say, you're all going to come on as new hires. Our position is, if a person has worked 25 years, and I know a gentleman actually worked 33 years in the private sector, there is provisions actually in the NAPE contracts. If you come in, there is a recognition for your service. So we're saying to Newfoundland Labrador Service, on behalf of the members we represent, there has to be a recognition of the service that people that have done in these jobs right across Newfoundland Labrador. It has to be dealt with. I've had conversation with officials in Treasury Board. This must be addressed. And like I said, right in our collective agreement that these members will fall into, there is provisions we're saying that must be respected. The route government is going, we are not prepared to agree with, which would actually not recognise their service.
Appreciate the time, Jerry.
Thank you very much, Paddy.
Take care. Bye-bye. Jerry Earle, President of NAPE. Break time. When we get back, the fisheries protests that are ongoing. Yesterday, I had to clear the gallery at the House of Assembly. I believe they're joining forces at the Patton building this morning. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 6. Say more to the independent member from Mount Pearl Southlands. That's Paul Lane. Paul, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you this morning?
Doing okay. Thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great. I just stepped outside of the legislature for a moment just to have a quick chat. Paddy, you and I, in the past, a couple of occasions, we have, I guess, had a conversation about the fishery. And, admittedly, as somebody who represents Mount Pearl, I'm be the first to say that, my knowledge of the fishery is very limited. But I would say that certainly as a Newfoundlander and Labradorian, I support my fellow Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who benefit from the fishery. Certainly I know in every urban district of the province, including Mount Pearl, that if the fishery were to shut down tomorrow, that it would have an economic impact on those communities, including Mount Pearl. You look at Donovan's Business Park as an example. There's lots of businesses there that either are solely or partially derive their business from the fishery. So the fishery is something that should be important to us all, whether we live in rural Newfoundland or whether we live in urban Newfoundland.
Well, I mean, just to add to that, Paul, people might not realize, and I think this is accurate, that there's more seafood offloaded in this St. John's Harbour than any other bay or harbour in the province. So it's a townie issue as much as it is a bayman issue.
That's right. That's correct. I didn't realize it myself until one day Tom Osborne said to me, and he said, you know what the biggest port for landing of fish, what district lands the most fish in the province? And first thing I said, I think I might have said Port of Grave or Bay de Verde or something like that. And he said, no. He said, my district. And I said, really? And I never thought about, down at the south side. And he is correct. So it does have a big impact on all of us, and it should be important to everybody, whether you live in rural Newfoundland or whether you live here in the St. John's metro area. So, with that said, of course, we have fishermen who have been protesting both inside and outside the gallery. They're over at the Patton building there this morning. And, I did take the time to go out and speak to a number of the fishermen to try, as best I could to understand their issues. And I was a little confused because, when questions were being asked in the House Assembly and the Minister of Fisheries would respond or the Premier would respond, all I kept hearing from them was, getting the price getting the prices set so they can get out on the water. And that came with a lot of shouts and balls from the gallery that fish harvesters were upset. And I quickly, in speaking to them, began to understand that this is much more than the price of crab or the price of any species of fish. That's really not what this is about. What this protest and what this concern is about, and I understand why they would be concerned, is the fact that we only have very few processors in the province that basically have a monopoly. Now, some fishermen I spoke to, they call them the oligarchs and cartels and so on. But whatever you want to call them, and how exaggerated or not exaggerated that may be, the fact of the matter is that you have limited processors, limited players that are processing fish, and price is one thing. But now we're getting into the realm of when you're allowed to go out, whether it's good or bad. They're telling you when you can fish. They're telling you how much you can bring in. So if you have a boat, and a boat can take X number of tons, and they're saying, okay, well, I'm going to go out, I'm going to catch my limit, fill the boat, and so on, bring in. No, we only want half a load.
Yeah. Day limits are one thing. Just hold on a second, Paul. Hold on a second. So the day limits is absolutely a problem, but inside the world of capacity, you can only land and process what you can do in the run of a day or a week. And I understand the frustration there, because every time you steam out costs money. But when it comes to processing capacity, I'm doing my very best to understand all the different concepts of what that means. But let's just say you've expanded processing capacity. Who's to say that a small license holder would be in any different position regarding daily limits? Secondly, expanding processing the sector does really nothing to affect price, right? I think we get caught up in some of these things which have been long-running concerns, but the fact of the matter is the price is only what the market's willing to pay. The end. It doesn't matter what the harvesters want. It doesn't matter what the processors want. It doesn't matter how many processing licenses there are or how many boats there are, because if you're selling your product somewhere else, and for the vast majority, let's say for instance snow crab, the vast majority is being sold elsewhere, it doesn't matter what anyone says here. The market's only going to spend on a pound of crab what the market's willing to spend. That's it. And you're correct. I agree with you, and I think most fishermen would acknowledge that. But again, the issue, as I understand it, is not so much the setting of the price or what the market will bear. The issue now is getting into, on top of that, concern that would be there, the issue is the fact that you're being told when you can go out, when you can't go out, how much fish you can catch. If it's going to cost you twice as much to catch it, the planners say, well, that's too bad. We can only handle so much. But at the same time, the government, there are other players, so I'm told, that would like to pick up the slack and process some fish, but the minister won't give them a license to do so. And then, of course, you have other issues, and people have told me, I had one gentleman call me. I'll just relay this story very quickly. He told me last year he had a quota cod. He caught cod, brought it in. According to him, it was grade A cod when he caught it. The processor said they would take the cod. But when the processor took it, it was left on the dock by the processor after they said they were taking it for 2 or 3 days. Then they brought it in, and now the quality was after going down. Not the fish harvester's fault. The fact that they took it, they said they would take it, they took it, and then they said, okay, no, it's grade B cod. So they got into a record with that. He only got paid for the grade B cod. He took it upon himself to go on Facebook and say, this is not right. And as a result of that, they said, don't bring us any more cod. And now, this year, he's told me that the plant has said, we're not taking any of your fish, but he can't go anywhere else. And I had another gentleman relay the fact to me. It was a similar type story. It might have been a different circumstance, but the same concept, I guess, of control. And he told me, and I'm only going by what the man told me, that he called and spoke to you, and as a result, he got a call from the plant saying, don't bring the fish here, we're not going to take it. And he said, well, what am I going to do with the fish? And he said, call Paddy Daly and ask him if he'll take your fish. That's what the fisherman told me yesterday. Yeah, short answer is no.
I mean, these are the types of things that if this is happening, is not good enough. And I can understand why fish harvesters would be very upset. And all they want is to be able to catch their fish and have someone get a fair price, but also be able to catch their fish when it's safe to do so, do it in the most effective way and economical way for them, and have someone process it. And if the capacity is not there in the existing system and there are others willing to step in to process it, then that's what they're asking for the minister, to open up a couple of more licenses to fill that gap. I don't think it's unreasonable, but anyway, that's just my view on the world of fishery with my limited knowledge. But I do understand why they're protesting, and it's important that we, once again, understand the value of the fishery to the entire province. And it doesn't just become an issue, of the fishery. It's also an issue for rural Newfoundland and Labrador, and that way of life, the small boat fishery, the value it brings to those small communities. And if the small boat fishermen are eliminated from that process, and eventually we end up with factory freezer trawlers, then that's bad for rural Newfoundland, and it's bad for all of us as Newfoundlanders.
Yeah, and some of these protests belong in Federation Building, some of them belong on Kent Street in Ottawa. Look, I mean, expanding the processing sector, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it. Outside buyers, I don't know if that necessarily means we're going to get dramatically more for a pound of whatever species. Possibly, but kind of unlikely. I understand what they're talking about, free enterprise, because they are hamstrung. They are absolutely, I was going to say slaves, that's not fair. They're absolutely, answering to an entity that they have zero control over. So that much is for sure. On price, this is only going to land in one spot. It's only going to be solved by an upfront understanding of what percentage of the market price is going to be afforded to harvesters, what percentage of the market price is going to go to the processors. That's it. There's no real other magic wand that could be waved here, because that was the uncertainty. Even when they got the $7.60 a pound versus $2.20 a pound, there was a change in the percentage of the market price that was given to the harvesters. So that's how they're going to settle this. And whether that's 40-60, 50-50, 30-70, I don't know. But it is going to be that and that alone that settles the price issue. Because this whole process, if I put in a price, you put in a price, and we just pick one or the other, I mean, it doesn't even make any sense on its face. And I'm late for the break, Paul. I appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
Thank you, Paddy, very much, and I appreciate the time as always. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right, let's take that break. Teledoc, you're next. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go. Line number 4. Mike, you're on the air.
Paddy.
Hi, Mike.
I was listening to your preamble there on the Teledoc. And I think the Teledoc is only just one of many scandals involving the contract with our healthcare system and our inability of the existing CEO and executive of that to properly negotiate contracts with these multinational companies.
Before we go too much further, do you have something new to add to the conversation this morning, Mike?
I don't know if you call it new or not, but the thing is that they've got companies there. They have 25,000 associates in Canada. They're into more than 2,200 locations. And when it comes to this Teledoc and that and all the rest of it, I got questions to ask. I don't have the answers. Is that who hired Teledoc? I know who hired Seaboard. That was done through the Commerce Group in the contract with the government that Commerce Group hired their own company, Seaboard, to do development work and software work and that and all the rest of it, and just did it, and the Compass paid their own company and borrowed the money from Eastern Health. Like, this stuff is going on there, and the thing that gets me is that into this contract with the Compass Group, which all this stuff originates from, is that they can subcontract. And in these subcontract negotiations with people like Teledoc or Seaboard or the restaurant services and all the rest of it, they have it there that price is not necessarily the issue. And they can charge basically what they want through these subcontracts. That our, say, either the general or the CPO or whoever it is, cannot go back to these private companies to find out anything about what we're paying, how they reach the people that they are buying from, and they're buying from their own companies. Like, it's the same thing as putting like their own companies into it. Like if you had the minister and he owned a company and he just gave that company contracts to do work with the government, he's in a conflict of interest. And when you have private companies there running government services and that and whatever, how can you have these people getting and buying from their own companies, which is what's happened here with Teledoc? And like you said, but the thing is that we're picking on one or two companies according as they come up with a small scandal. But the whole concept and the actions of it are basically wrong, and it's going to come to the ruination of our healthcare system or any other system in government. And the thing is, as far as I'm concerned, is that we need these people, yes. We can't get rid of all these people. They're big international companies with millions, billions of dollars and everything else. But the problem that we got here, the overall problem, is our failure in negotiating proper and fair contracts. That, look, we've got to have the entitlement to, if somebody's making a deal for us, don't we have the right to know what that dealings are? There's where the government that is failing to enforce this. Like, they're above our Tendering Act, above our laws, our rules, and our regulations. They don't pay any attention to any of that. So when the leaking of information and everything else comes out, they got the computer systems. They operate it. They design the systems. They're operating and doing whatever they want to, and they have access to everything in government. Our medicals, the money that we have, the money we got coming in, our taxation, they have access to everything. So if we're going to have private industry out there, private contractors run this, what do we need the government for? What do we need all these government employees for? Why do we have 72 private contract employees working with 72 government employees, and the government employees are told what to do? So who did the Teledoc contract? It was a contract. Who signed the PO? Who authorized them to do the work? If there was a PO, who signed it? Who did the requisition in order to generate a PO for him to do the job? Because every time a contractor goes on a job site, you're supposed to have a requisition to generate a PO and have a PO for payment. So I ask the questions here now. Who authorized Teledoc to do the work that they did? Who contacted them? And who signed it? Somebody did. So was it done through the Compass Group, or was it done through government employees? And this stuff here, as far as I'm concerned, is open, that we need answers from, and the only one to answer the questions is the minister.
Fair enough, Mike. I appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, so we did have a caller earlier, a troubling situation, being able to get what we know is a busy general practitioner, a family doctor, to sign off on any type of form. And in this case, it was a pediatric disability tax credit form. So they had found a doctor up along, couple $100 would be the fee. I think it's well understood here that the fee is somewhere in around $55. It's whether or not you can actually get the doctor to do it. And there's a variety of reasons why I've been told why these different families have had difficulty on that front. But Jeff's in the queue. He's a member of the Ostomy Society of Canada, wants to talk about exactly that issue. And then we're going to talk about the winner of the Ward 4 by-election. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 5. Say good morning to the, I think, still unofficial winner of Ward 4 here in the city of St. John's, a by-election to replace Ian Froud, who stepped away citing a lack of motivation. I'm not sure if the city clerk has made it official yet, but let's find out. Good morning, Tom Davis. You're on the air.
Your guess is as good as mine, Paddy.
Yeah, I hadn't heard, so I thought you may have. So
no, yeah, carry on.
First off, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And I will extend congratulations to the other 3 on the ballot, because it takes a certain dollop of determination and courage, or whatever the right word is, to throw your hat in the ring. So, and certainly to the victor, congratulations. Let's start with this. Tom, you and I have spoken A fair bit. So you have been pulling no punches about the operations at St. John's City Hall and or St. John's Sports and Entertainment, and I think rightfully so. And obviously the Voters Award for appreciated because they voted for you almost double what they voted for Mr. Russell. How do you think you're going to be received by your now soon-to-be colleagues in the council chamber, given how forceful you've been against their approach to municipal politics?
Well, that is a very good question. At the end of the day, obviously, I'm someone who wants to have a team around me and wants to have consensus. However, I do believe firmly that given the fact that they brought down 13% tax increases in the same year that they're getting 2.5% raises, everybody down there, there's a disconnect. And so my goal is to bring the residents literally, hopefully, into the council chambers, and also figuratively, and I want them to reach out to me and motivate me and send me their emails and send me their messages and give me the stories, the personal stories, the struggles that they're going through. You know, I firmly believe from an economics point of view that Newfoundland and Labrador is an incredible place with a great deal of opportunity. However, I think we peaked about 10 years ago, 11 years ago with the peak in the oil boom. So now my approach is, economically speaking, the city, the senior bureaucrats, the council has to figure out how to do more with less. I will not vote in favor of a tax increase, full stop. And in actual fact, I'll be pushing for rationalization of services that would include going to a 2-week garbage collection to reduce costs wherever we can. And but I plan to be prepared. I also plan to I have a lot to learn, and there's a lot I don't know. I have a lot of questions as I was going around. I mean, on Sunday, I drove through the whole ward, and I looked at the snow situation. And then again, with all the rain, I drove around to see the two different perspectives. So when you overlay the facts, so the economic belief that I firmly believe, and I don't think it's arguable, then on top of that, climate change, when you put those two things together, you know, we've got to create a sustainable, livable city where the residents can afford to live. And that's going to require a lot of adaptation. I know you probably didn't listen to the round table, but one of the difficult questions they asked was, do you believe in burning it all down or in progressive incremental change? And one of the candidates who I have a lot of respect for, Miles, he said, burn it down. And I plan to consult with Miles. He's got some great ideas, some great insight. But my answer was prescribed burning. Like in a forest fire situation, you proactively have to tear some things down. And we've got issues with zoning. We've got issues with how we spend money. And, you know, when the mayor talks about a 50-year carbon neutral, that's just like saying not my problem. There's no difficult choices being done down there. So we got a lot of work. So I guess your answer is, how am I going to be received? I'm going to be the most prepared, and I'm going to have the most, hopefully, the support from the ward and also from the rest of the city, I'm hoping, so we can do the difficult things that need to be done, but at the same time, accept the challenge for what they are, the purpose. I mean, that's what I know. That's why I ran, and that's why I know the councillors run. I know that's why the city employees go to work every day. It's not personal. I just think that they've lost touch of the end goal, and they've created a narrative that allows them to keep on keeping on, business as usual.
Doing more with less. And I suppose this might fall into the category of things that you need to understand how it works and or the details or whatever the right phrase is. But say, for instance, rolling back in services, because you've often talked about salaries and the number of people working for the city, many of which would be involved in collective bargaining, which is difficult, if not impossible, to roll back. Now, there's certainly lots of non-unionized people that will be up for consideration, but things like adjusting the level of service, once every 2 weeks to see my garbage picked up, that would be absolutely baked into a concern addressing collective bargaining. So do you understand the implications of what that means necessarily at this moment in time, or is that still something you need to be walked through? Because if we have people who are unionized, who are absolutely part of garbage collection, then the reduction in services there has a reduction in the need for the numbers of people working, the number of hours worked, and might be a little bit more difficult than you thought. What do you think?
Well, if the City of St. John's workforce is similar to the provincial government workforce, then we've got a lot of people who are at the end of their careers. City of St. John's, the people who started prior to 2017 have a very lucrative pension. It is defined benefits, and it also is indexed somewhat, goes up 1.25%. So I have a feeling there's probably people who are probably going to be moving out the door soon. And hopefully by using technology and also interfacing more with the residents to try and find efficiencies, hopefully we can nuance this. Now, again, to your point, there's lots I do not know. However, again, you can't, when you knock on doors and someone answers the door and the house is cold and it's a senior citizen and you know they're really struggling, they tell you how they retired from the provincial government and their pension's not indexed and they're really struggling. And so for me, my job is not to make sure that my employees' standard of living is maintained unless we can also maintain the standard of living of the residents in that order. So I know that's difficult and some may call it harsh. However, reality and pragmatism has to be introduced, and courageous leadership needs to be introduced into all the halls of this country, province, and city. And I'll do my best to do that. And again, I know it's not going to be easy. And I'm not going in there trying to upset everybody. And, I'm going to sit down and learn everything. I have so many questions about how and why we do things. And maybe when we go through them, they all make perfect sense. And maybe it's not going to be easy. And nothing's easy, but I've spent the last 34 years in business, and it has not been easy. But I have a innate personality that really loves challenge, and I'm hoping that the residents will join me, and the council will join me, and the senior bureaucrats will join me, and unions will join me in doing what we need to do to not be in a situation where in 5 years' time the residents are rioting in the streets because we've driven the city to the point that it's not affordable to live here, and that's my biggest fear.
There's no such thing as a junior councillor, right? I mean, that was one of the terms flicked around out in Stephenville, which caused some great consternation on behalf of certain councillors who eventually quit. But when you're new to the team, doesn't mean you're a junior, it just means you're new. So there's things to figure out, and there's things to understand regarding protocol inside the chambers themselves. Are you, but someone who's running his own business for decades, that comes with a certain sense of, being the captain and being out in front and being in charge, because ultimately you're signing the front of the check. So you do have the accountability and you are in charge. Do you have any thoughts on entering in as a new councillor and being a listener as opposed to a talker for a certain amount of time until your feet are absolutely soaking wet up to the ankles or knees before you are as forceful as you have been on this program?
It's a good question. I guess it's going to depend on what I hear and what I see. So, I've sat around boardroom tables where I listened to bureaucrats, and at some point I would boil, and then I would speak out. So, and that's just a reality. I mean, if all I'm hearing is pandering and blah, 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 then no, I'll speak out, and I'll be calling your show on it. If there's not movement and consensus, whether it's small business owners or seniors or just families trying to survive or trying to renovate their homes or all the challenges, the myriad of people. I mean, I love the fact that there's been movement down there, and there has been. You can see there is a change, and I'm hoping the timing is right. Obviously next year is an election year. I'm hoping that's going to help motivate the councillors to listen more. I'm going to try and set a higher bar for engagement with the citizens. I have some ideas or things the city have done in the past with engagement where they actually had an interactive sidewalk clearing where you could go in and drop a pin and make notes. Well, that thing hasn't been active for 4 years. Well, it exists. It's been designed. It's sitting there. I want that for the whole city and not just for sidewalks. Anytime a resident has an issue, they should be able to go in and drop a pin and make suggestions or complaints potentially. And so there's engagement. I already talked to the minister regarding speed cameras and red light traffic cameras. I've already talked to John Abbott about getting a playground down in Chalker Place. That's before I was even elected. So imagine what I'm going to do now when I have the support, but I also have all those residents who've put their faith in me and who've put their trust in me, and people it's an extra sense of responsibility. This was not a normal election at a normal time, and I don't want to disappoint. I don't mind upsetting people sometimes when you can't avoid it, but the last thing I'm going to do to those people that I knocked on their doors is I'm not going to disappoint them. And so I feel that responsibility, and I want to thank them, and I want to thank all the supporters. I want to thank the other three candidates. I learned so much from them, and Greg and Nicholas and Miles, and I want their insight, and we're going to get together, and I also want the insight of all the seniors and all the engineers and all the business people and all the small families, and I want to learn as much as possible, and I want to try and do as good a job as I can. That's my goal.
I appreciate the time this morning, Tom. Do you happen to know when the swearing in is supposed to take place?
I actually don't know. I don't know a thing yet, but I'm sure I'll find out soon.
If we had more time, I'd like to get some reaction from you or anybody else listening about Charlie Oliver's comments. 43 years in the business of commercial development, and he says bureaucratic inefficiency is keeping investment dollars away from the city and the province. That has long been the case. It's been a behemoth that nobody is seemingly willing to tackle or understands how to tackle it. I would suggest same way eat an elephant, one bite at a time, but that's got to be in rapid form as opposed to a snail's pace. Tom, I'm off to the newscast, but I appreciate your time. Congratulations once again.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break for the news. Don't go away.
You're listening to a rebroadcast of VOCM Open Line. Have your say by calling 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626 and listen live weekday mornings at 9 a.m.
Welcome back. Let's go to line number 1. Russ, you're on the air.
Hi, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you?
Good. Paddy, great, thanks. Paddy, just going to chime in for a second on the whole carbon tax. Paddy, the first thing we need to acknowledge with, I won't say global warming, but global change, we don't know 100%. But one person I do kind of consider a bit of an expert, and I was lucky enough to be able to discuss with him in some detail a couple of years ago with Dr. Suzuki, David Suzuki. And he told me that if the entire country of Canada fell off the globe along with all our pollutants and our emissions, it still would not make any difference whatsoever. The big polluters, Paddy, India, Russia, China. And it's funny, as these countries become more developed and want what we have, it's a battle that I'm not saying doesn't need to be dealt with, but I don't want to fight an unwinnable battle of global change on the backs of the taxpayers of Canada. And it just seems to me where but we're an oil country, so, there's some realities with that as well.
Well, here's the reality regarding oil, is last year in an environment where I'm told constantly that the government is trying to kill the oil industry, last year they produced a record number of barrels, record revenue, record profit. So not necessarily an industry that's being battered.
No, of course not, and of course they had to say that. But like I said, we're an oil country, and we need it. But my big concern is that I don't think that Canada is really a key player in changing any of this the climate issue, and it seems like and I understand trying to help, but when it's not a winnable battle, and it seems like it's more based on just virtue signaling by our prime minister, and trying to do what's responsible. But if it's not going to make a difference, sure, let's do the responsible thing. But when it comes to really punishing the taxpayers for a battle that's not winnable, based on just what Canada deserves to do.
But I wonder why you're just including us and not anybody else, because you're right, but Canada, the fact of the matter is we punch way above our weight on per capita emissions, which I think is part of the conversation, and Canada's not pretending to try to do it alone. The countries around the world, I think some 193 that signed on to the Paris Accord, they're trying to think, because if there's not going to be international cooperation, there will be no progress. That's absolutely true. Whether we talk about climate change or business investment or taxes on big business, or we're talking about migration or anything else, unless there's international cooperation on these things, people trying to do anything on a standalone basis in a very small global reality these days is a fool's errand. And I think I'll agree with the basics of your point or your argument, but the fact is we've tried to enter into international cooperation here. So is it virtue signaling coming from other countries that are trying to do something similar, with or without a carbon tax? Investment in clean innovation and technology, whether whether that be is what the oil companies' favorite is carbon capture or any other initiatives. I mean, the United States taking a big swing at it with their Inflation Reduction Act. Countries throughout Europe, the European Union, are doing the exact same thing. And whether it comes in the form of energy efficiency, consuming less, transitioning to different sources of fuels, whether that be addition with more renewables to the grid, because it's not just a one thing. It's not just the carbon tax. If we're talking about all of the complexities of dealing with what's happening, and people tell me that it's not real and it's a scam and all the rest, but you know who doesn't think it's a scam? The oil companies. I mean, they sat on their own scientific data for decades, and eventually, when compelled to testify in front of the American Senate, they were quite clear. They understand the contribution to global warming, climate change, the heating of the world, when they had the data themselves. They know their contribution. So if they're willing to say that quiet part out loud, and the insurance companies are saying the quiet part out loud, I don't know how we can deny it, but international cooperation, without it, and we can't tell the Chinese what to do, or the government of India what to do, or the Russians or Iranians, but that's because they're obstinate. It doesn't mean because they won't, we shouldn't. Just my opinion.
Yeah, but I know. And as for the Paris Accord, that's just basically based on an honor system, and I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of the Paris Accord meet the agenda that is set up for it.
Well, we're not on track.
And I'm not. No one's on track with it. And there's no penalties if you miss deadlines and things like that. So the Paris Accord, I don't think it's really worth a whole lot. But Paddy, I'm not saying there's not climate change, climate warming. I have no idea. But what I am saying is that Canada, like I said, the entire country could fall off the globe with all its emittance and all its pollutants, and it wouldn't make a difference. So I think that's something that needs to be looked at when we're putting these, big taxes on the rest of the country. And as far as global warming, there's so many variables that we don't know. Like, for instance, now there's talk that because of global warming and the increased CO2 in the air, plants are now able to grow in massive areas that at one time they were not able to grow because of the amount of CO2 that's in the air that could benefit the planet. So we don't know 100%. We can't make a difference in Canada. So I think let's do our part, but I think there's a huge element of virtue signaling by our Prime Minister on the back of the taxpayers.
The argument about more CO2, consequently more photosynthesis, more plants growing where they were unable to prior, does that offset the concerns with storms and prolonged droughts and flooding? I would suggest no. I mean, there's probably some good upside to things growing better and more bountiful where they hadn't been in years past, but I'm not so sure that represents an offset that cancels out some of the devastating impact. And again, when the oil companies, insurance companies are saying exactly what the consensus in the scientific community is saying, I think it's worthwhile paying attention. And again, it's not simply about a carbon tax. Because I think that when the conversation starts regarding climate change, if all we're going to focus in on is carbon tax, then we're probably missing an awful lot of stuff. I mean, even about energy efficiency. The federal government, provincial governments have come out with pots of money, and not only does that reduce emissions and the amount of energy we use, it's good for my pocketbook. So again, there's some wins to be had here for individual taxpayers. There's some potential wins to be had at the governmental level, even though I don't care about their wins. I care about my wins and your wins. So if I can do better, use less, spend less, then that's probably a good thing.
I agree with everything you're saying 100%. But once again, I do think there is room to accept the fact that we may have a Prime Minister who is more concerned with virtue signaling than he is his constituents. And like I said before, until the rest of the world does what they're responsible to do, which they're not going to, for Canada to do it because it's a morally right thing to do, I think that's leading the people astray. And right now, we're not going to make a difference. Why should we be burdening our taxpayers so much? Let's pull the line, but to try to be a leader where we're just a very small player, I think is a little bit arrogant. But I do agree 100%. There needs to be something done, but on the back of Canadian taxpayers, based on the fact that what we do will have virtually no positive effect on the climate change. I think it's just frustrating.
I appreciate the time this morning, Russ. Thanks for the call.
My pleasure, Paddy. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Okay, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to one of the Innu elders. That's Elizabeth Panashaway. Good morning, Elizabeth. You're on the air.
Hello.
Hello there.
Yeah. Okay, I'm Elizabeth Nashwich.
Yes, ma'am.
I was going to talk about low-level flying. I heard about she's going to start again this spring. I'm very, very concerned, and I'm very sad. I just want to cry, and when I think about it.
So, Elizabeth, you're right. The Germans have said they'd like to entertain low-level flying exercises at a 5-wing Goose Bay. The Premier actually has said that he's on side as long as there's agreement amongst the Inuit community. So, as someone who lived it, back in the 70s and 80s when this was happening and the supersonic booms, what was actually the reality on the ground? Beyond being the acoustic nuisance, what did it mean for country food, caribou herds, and likewise?
Yeah. When low-level flying was here, 1979, a lot of people was very concerned. People Shehadit Labrador, always people go in the country hunting, and animals every spring they had a baby, like caribou and the other animals. And the noise, big noise. And the children, he couldn't play outside, scared the noise. And environment, what's going to happen in environment? All kind of animals. It's not only caribou, all kind of animals. Because people are always hunting, and another thing I was writing there, and I'm very, very concerned. A lot of people, Shehajit, a lot of people, my people, very concerned. What's going to happen? I don't think nobody want, because it's big noise. The people here, we hear Shehadji thousand years. This is land, and the children, a lot of children, and the old people. What's going to happen? I know there was low-level flying 1979. I know there was a lot of people was complaining, a lot of people protest, a lot of people went in jail, women and men. That's what I was going to talk about. I should talk about more. My English not very good. I wish I had more speak English. I want to talk about more low-level flying. I'm very concerned and I'm very sad when I think about it. When I think about it, I just crying. Yeah. Did you want to ask me something? If you want to ask me something, say easy words. Because my English is not very good.
I can understand you clearly, Elizabeth. Don't worry. So basically the concern, I don't live in Labrador, so my concern or thoughts on it would be vastly different than yours, someone who has lived it. So like I asked you not so long ago is, what did it really look like and feel like? Was it a fact that the caribou were just, the migratory routes were elsewhere, or did we see a loss of caribou because of low-level flying or some relationship? I'm trying to be clear and use words that I hope you understand. Do you know what I'm asking or know what I'm talking about?
I think you talk about caribou because people, he knows all kind of animals, and it's not only caribou. Every spring, always animal is going to have a baby, and I think she's going to run away. She's going to try to find a place to stay, the baby. All animals is going to have a baby this spring, and that's one. I don't know if I give you a wrong answer.
No, there's no wrong answer. I'm just wondering about your perspective. You can offer whatever you like, Elizabeth.
Yeah, that's one. I'm very concerned. No live flying. I don't think no one. All Innu people and the other people very concerned what's going to happen. The noise and animals, what's going to happen, everything. And people, thousand years go in a country hunting, and the children scared. She couldn't play outside. I remember when I went in the country, my children, when my children was young. Yeah, the children very scared. And it's not only my children, all the children. A lot of people going in the country hunting. That's what I was talking about. If I find someone to help me, maybe I can send a letter to you. What I'm thinking, what the concern.
You can do that if you think that's a better way to do it, Elizabeth. I'm certainly open to that, and I appreciate your time. I'm pretty sure I followed along with what you were saying this morning. Regardless of what you think of your own English, I think you made your point, and I hope you think you did. But if you want to send me something else with someone else's help, please do.
Yeah. Okay, if I find someone.
Okay.
And thank you very much. You give the time to talk about that.
You're welcome.
I want to talk about again, or I'm going to try to find someone to help me make a letter sent to you.
Okay. If you do that, I'll be sure to read. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Jeff is back in the queue. He's a member of the Ostomy Society of Canada. We're referring to a call we had earlier in the show about the Pediatric Disability Tax Form. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 4. Jeff, you're on the air. Good morning, Jeff.
Betty, I called in this morning because this subject is a little dear to my heart. I'm part of the Ostomy Society of Canada. I'm part of the local corner group here. I've had many patients apply for their disability credit for the ostomy, and had doctors say, well, they don't consider the ostomy to be a disability, so they wouldn't sign it. A doctor has to sign it. We have a patient's Bill of Rights, and if you go on the CRA site and search disability credit form, you will find a typable version of that you can download. You can fill it out yourself and get the doctor to sign it. Now, if the doctor don't want to sign it, you can talk to a lawyer if you like, but you can talk to go to one of the support groups. They'll get you the Bill of Rights. The doctor has no right to not sign that. They don't work for CRA and they have no say in what's a disability, what's not.
And how can that work? Because even if you just look at the general terms of eligibility for disability tax credit, if we're talking about children and or adults, they're pretty broad stuff. Now, we are talking about severe or prolonged impairment. It's the inability to do a day-to-day duty in so-called quote-unquote normal fashion. It includes walking, dressing, feeding, vision, hearing, speaking, can't remember what else in there, mental functions, bladder functions. So they're pretty broad categories.
You said excessive times in the bathroom if you have Crohn's disease or if you have
that's right.
Anything that may inhibit your normal activities through your life, right? And also sometimes even if it's causing a financial burden to you because of your supplies you got to buy or whatever. So there are a lot of factors that factors into that. Patty, I'd like to give her my number privately if you can. If she wants to call in and get my number, I can certainly help her walk through this process. It is a pretty daunting process, and you have to have the verbiage exact, or you're not going to get your disability credit.
Well, I'm sure she'd appreciate the input for someone who's been down this path. So, Jeff, we have your number. I'll ask David to call that caller to ask if she's willing to share her telephone number. She did send me an email, which I can find because she gave me a website that people can also go to. But we'll do that. We have your number. If she agrees to it, then we'll of course share her number with you. How's that?
perfect, right? Because I have helped, I'm going to say, at least a half a dozen people get their disability credit in the last 2 years.
Okay. Yeah, she also provided a website.
I volunteered that part as part of the Ostomy Society, and everybody knows, they'll say, anybody brings that side up, they'll call Jeff Throber, so let them know, hey, here's my number. But, yeah, I mean, I'd like to help these people out. This is, I helped a lady out about 3 months ago. She was denied twice by the government, but she was filling it form on. Simple as that.
So I think you're a good man for trying to help this lady, and the website she provided as well is called benefits and the number 2.ca. There's some forms there and information, and there's a fella named Wayne McLeod who's the contact provider there. So I'll put you on hold. David will speak with you. We'll get in touch with that particular caller, and we'll see if she wants to share her telephone number. How's that?
Sure.
Okay, terrific. I'm going to put you on hold. David, you want to take over there? Let's keep rolling. Let's go to line number 6. Good morning, Dawn. You're on the air.
Hi, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Hi, yes. I think I just told your secretary there that I'm new in the province. I keep coming back and forth. And each time the changes are, let's call it different, but worse. We have when I get off the ferry boat, there's no way to contact the world because there's no radio station out there and there's no line service, telephones.
Where are we talking about, Don?
Getting off the ferry boat.
Oh, in Port aux Basques?
Our highway to home. And a deployable boat that I was on, I thought this is disgraceful. Anyway, as I am now back in the province, I realized that I just wanted to call you because on the ferry boat, I looked at all the space, and they took the old cargo, what do you call it, the back of the trucks, those back of the trucks that the trucks have to tow, and they took all those containers and they put them on the boat, and all the new ones drove up from on the highway that were with me, and they parked right there in North Sydney, and they left the freshest stuff in the trucks. Now, on that boat, I saw there was space for more trucks. Anyway, we got the old ones on. Now I made a trip up to our city, a 2-hour city, and I couldn't get any groceries. I came to find out that not only do those containers get off the ferry boat, sit at Port aux Basques for a while, get towed to St. John's, wait there until there's a couple of storms, then they bring our groceries back across the island and anywhere else that needs food. And then I don't know who's paying for it. And it takes another couple of days. And now that St. John's has so many storms, I go to the stores and I can't get any groceries because they're all in St. John's in the storm. How in God's name did a can of corned beef meat get to St. John's that came from Brazil? But they said that's the way it is here. And the shelves were bare, like the poor devils over in Ukraine and Gaza. And I thought, and the Newfoundlanders are putting up with this? When I was very young, I was very proud of a railway track. And I didn't know that there were no more trains coming on it. But it was so pretty and it was so clean and people could walk on it because that area was cleared by the Newfoundlanders long ago to have a train come across the island. And then they said, yeah, but we don't use a train anymore because we're small gauge. Now, that word stuck with me forever. We are still a small gauge, you know that?
Small gauge is reference to the rail tracks.
Well, it's talking about our brains.
No, but that's...
Because to let our people... I would get on Port aux Basques and I would have a Boston Tea Party on that wharf. And if anybody wanted their groceries, they could get them out of the water. Because it's not fair that we have to wait another maybe 20 days to get some groceries in the stores around here. And I'm just going to say all of Newfoundland, because if we're waiting for St. John's to send us a can of corned beef, it's pretty sad.
And send it to where? Are we talking about Labrador or...
No, I lived in Goose Bay too. I listened to the lady just now. I lived in Goose Bay too, maybe about 40 years ago. And we used to cry because the airplane had to bring the freight in, and we don't have any yet. And the beer skunk because, it's been here since last September. No, we're talking about our local towns out around St. John's and beyond, the rest of our island. Maybe that food also has to try to get to Labrador, over to Blanc-Sablon. But it's all in St. John's in a snowstorm. And I know now when people laugh at us, they're thinking, who the hell got the brains to think about all these things to make us happy and healthier and smart?
But what's all in St. John's? I'm not sure I'm following that part of the conversation. So, I mean, if it's something that came across on Marine Atlantic, the Port of Basque, it doesn't come to St. John's before it gets sent to Labrador. I mean, if something came across an Oceanex, of course, it would have its initial port in St. John's, but not sure I'm following.
I'm telling you, the transport trucks, after they get to Newfoundland, are sent to St. John's for our food to get distributed. And then we are allowed to have it when it's distributed and brought to the rest of the island. But out there, like you said, you've had a lot of snowstorms this winter. And people from the rest of the island are waiting for the shelves to be filled. They don't have any warehouses anymore. They don't have any back places to store their food. I just wanted to tell you that I wish in God's name that Newfoundland and Labrador, whoever needs to fight the government, whoever came up with this plan, people in Port of Basque can work, you know. They can empty a truck and distribute food and maybe get it to the closer communities.
I appreciate the call and the concern, Don. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Leonard, you're next. Don't go away.
Nutrition, exercise, keeping the cold at bay. Whatever keeps you feeling great, the Wellness and Healthy Lifestyle Show on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Leonard, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you this morning?
Doing fine, thanks. How about you?
Good. Everything is good in Leaf Land these days?
Yeah, they're playing pretty well. I guess it remains to be seen how that translates to the playoffs, but so far, they are a fairly dangerous looking team.
Yeah, they look good with the new additions to Edmonton, and you know what I mean? They need to shore up their defense. The goal attending is still questionable, I guess, who's going to be starting the playoffs between Samsonov and Wall, so that's yet to be determined.
Yeah, and you know, I don't hate any teams. I don't cheer for Toronto, but if I was a Leaf fan, I'd be nervous about that back end. And choose between Samsonov, who had a mental problem with stopping the puck not that long ago, and Wall, who sometimes is a bit of a teabag. That's a big worry.
Yeah, Samsonov seems to rebound after that injury that he had, though, since he's come back. So he's looking pretty good, I got to say. But like I said, like any goalie, you got your good nights and your bad nights, right? So hopefully going forward now they'll be playing their A games, and Leafs can at least make it out of the second round for probably the second year in a row. Let's hope.
We'll see what happens. I love the playoff hockey, so I'm actually looking forward to it. Don't think my team's going to be there, but I think they're going to be better in years to come.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, there's a lot of young talent there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Lewis looks good too. You mentioned that this morning. Yeah, I'm glad to see he's starting to come around too. So
he's fast. I mean, that's one thing I can tell you.
Yeah, exactly. The reason for my call this morning was you were talking to a gentleman, Jeff, just caught the tail end of the conversation, talking about disabilities people have, and I'm an injured worker, and I'm in receipt of workers' compensation. Just wondering if I've been diagnosed with a permanent function impairment, so would I qualify under that disability, get that credit once I file for my taxes? You have any idea if I do or not?
I wouldn't be able to answer that question, Leonard. It's between you and a medical practitioner, most notably your doctor, whether it be the specialist you see or your family doctor, because that's the process. You have to get it signed off by the doctor. So I wouldn't be able to, from afar, be able to tell you what the eligibility looks like. I do know if you have a severe or prolonged impairment in one or many categories, then, and if you receive therapy to support one of your vital body functions, you very well might be eligible for the tax credit. And it goes through a variety of categories, and big, broad ones too. Walking, dressing yourself, feeding yourself, vision, speaking, hearing, bladder control functions, bowel control functions. So there's a lot to it. So the best thing I could say to you to that question is I'd ask that directly of your doctor the next time you get an opportunity, because I'd be loath to say yes or no because I really don't know the answer.
Yeah, I basically I've went through chiro and went through rehab and the different avenues that you go through for treatment and that. And basically, I've been told that I'm no longer I'll no longer be able to receive the treatment because I've exhausted all the treatments. So, that's what I'm saying. I've been diagnosed with a permanent function impairment. So that, to me, it would be a disability. So if you understand what I'm saying.
I do. It sounds like you'd be eligible, but I'd hate to give you the bum steer. There is a specific tax form that you're going to have to fill out. I've got it here somewhere. Claiming the credit. Let's see here. So it's tax form T2... I don't want to give you bad information here either. So it's line 31600 on the tax return form itself. You do have to fill out that specific one that the doctor will sign off for you. And what did you just tell me what it was, David? It's T2201.
T2001?
2201.
2201, okay. Yeah, okay, Patty. Yeah, I'll check into that and see what I can come up with. And once I get verification, I'll definitely let you know and the listening audience there. So,
yeah, please do. And if we can be of any assistance, you get back to me and we'll do what we can. There are some private companies out there that can help you do it, but when they help you, of course, they need to get paid, so they take a percentage of your tax credit. Yeah. So if you can figure it out on your own, it's probably the very best idea. If you don't have any luck with trying to find 2201 and or understand where it is on your tax form itself, you get back to us and I'll give you what information I can.
All right, Patty. Sounds great, my friend. Thank you.
I appreciate your time. Good luck.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Yeah, I'm not going to try to dig too far back into prior conversations on the show this morning regarding climate change or carbon tax, but do me a personal solid, especially if you're going to take to social media. At least just actually write what I said, not what you think I said, or not what you think is going to get you a click or some sort of saucy reply. Look, I get it. You quickly become a target, and that's okay by me. I'm not here to try to make friends or please everyone, because that is absolutely a flight of fancy. But let's all do ourselves the same. I won't try to misquote you or put words in your mouth if you don't do it to me. How about that? Deal? What do you say? Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Rob, you're on the air.
Morning, Patty. How are you?
Doing okay. How about you?
Pretty good. Just wanted to call in and make a few comments on the disability tax credit. I heard spoke about it on the line or on your show this morning. In my home, I've had extensive troubles and legwork and trying to get the disability tax credit and Canada Pension Disability, and I have a child with cancer, and we have a lot of disabilities in the family. So I've been through the ringer on this, and I've learned some quick tidbits that could probably help people. Excuse me. I've heard a gentleman call in not long ago to say that you don't have to get a doctor to fill it out. And he's right. But I will tell you, and of course it probably makes somewhat of a difference, a bit of common sense, that you got to realize when you send off Form T2201 to the CRA to get approved for the disability tax credit in specific, which is totally different from disability Canada pension. And believe it or not, you can be approved for one and not the other. That's the funny thing about this, is that one of them can approve you and say, oh yeah, you're disabled with this. And then when you apply for the other one, they say, no, not in our department, because it's handled by 2 different departments. But in regards to the Canada Pension Disability credit, when they read it, they know when they read the Form 2201, and as you said yourself, that is a very thick form, and it talks about everything, from walking to eating, like you've said it. So they know if a doctor has filled that out, because, of course, doctors can write the medical jargon versus what I can write on it. The other thing is that if you fill it out and go to a doctor and say, listen, boy, I want this signed, well, the doctor is going to want to review what you wrote, because he's the person who needs to agree with what you said. So you're going to have to pay him a fee to fill it out. And in one instance in my home, I was doing this myself and for a child with cancer. And it took me 8 tries before I got it. And I finally caught on after a while that I need a doctor to fill this out because I can't use the medical terminology, the medical jargon. I can't relate this thing to this thing, or how do I do it, because I'm not a medical person. So one thing is, if you have a problem like that, diabetes or whatever the case may be, Crohn's, they're all disabilities at some degree. And the gentleman just called in from workers' compensation. We may think we have a disability, but not necessarily in the eyes of the CRA. I'm a diabetic. They told me, yeah, you are, but not as it relates to our criteria, so you don't qualify.
Yeah, because I guess the issue there would be if you are a diabetic and can manage your symptoms and manage your diabetes, you're able to lead a so-called normal life and conduct your daily activities in a so-called normal fashion, which I kind of get. But like, who at CRA is able to make that medical diagnosis in whether it be in Prince Edward Island or in Ottawa or wherever their filing is evaluated, versus the doctor who understands the criteria, signs off on it, and suggests that you should be eligible based on the criteria on the government's own website. So who are we trusting? The doctor, who's your doctor, you're his patient or her patient, versus someone sitting in a revenue agency office? Is sort of strange.
And you're absolutely right. And down the road on a few things that I did find out is, in actuality, these tax credit forms that you fill out, 2201s, they go to registered nurses that work for the federal government. They're the ones that decide. They decide if you qualify or not. Now, you know as well as I do, and the listening public, if you are filling out these forms yourself and you put in one word, and under each heading or each category, there is a box on the form that says explain. When you start to explain and you put in one word that they don't like, they get stuck on that word and they'll reject it, send it back to you. You have to start over again. So the treating physician holds more weight than anybody else filling out the form, especially if it's the physician that's treating that particular disease that you're saying I have that causes disability. In one instance, in my case, family doctor filling out the 2201, it was sent back and rejected because of something she put in the explanation. Now I took it down to the treating specialist doctor, and when I sent that in, it was approved. And when I looked at two of them side by side, it was just based on how it was written. It's very black and white. Like, you check this box and then you check that box, and that's all fine. We all can do that. But where they get you and where they kind of, I guess it's complicated, is when they ask you to explain. And of course, you can have one leg and they'll say you're not disabled in our eyes, but it's how it's written to them in the explanation. So if anybody, like they say, if you go to court and you're your own lawyer, you're a fool. If you fill out this form and you send it in your own language and you're not a medical professional, well, you're probably your own fool, and you're going to tie yourself up for months, if not years, like I did with, I was told my child had cancer. Oh, yes, but cancer is not a disability. But the child is in bed in the hospital, and he's been in there 500 days, but it's not a disability. And no, and I was arguing from the point of view as a normal common Joe that really don't have a lot of medical knowledge. What I did find out after I went through it all, and of course, it's like the old saying, once you go through something, well, you got more knowledge of it. It was when the doctor wrote on the note that, yes, the child has cancer, but what makes him eligible for the disability tax credit would be the side effects from the cancer. So it could be just that specific. Now, that don't sound like much different, but in their eyes, it is. So, it's a very convoluted. It's not as easy as 1, 2, 3. It's very, they make you work for it. You have to work for this.
I think that could be, now it's unfortunate, but I think that could be said for dealing with government on anything, is it does become quite onerous. And, if it's as simple as you describe, that one misplaced word or one word they don't like or agree with that constitutes not being eligible for something that you absolutely should be, it's, it shouldn't be that level of confusion.
Absolutely not. And Paddy, I'll tell you this. In one letter I received back from the CRA, it said, your son has cancer. And the doctor was explaining the type of cancer, et cetera. And they said, cancer is not covered. It doesn't qualify him for the disability tax credit. Now, when the doctor, I said, can you send it in again, please? When he wrote on it, his disability is from the side effects of cancer. There's only two words in the difference: side effects. So, in other words, cancer wasn't covered, but the side effects of cancer, vomiting, being bedridden, side effects from the chemotherapy, whatever, that qualified him. So, yeah, and it's, you know what, it's very upsetting, and it's very, it causes you to lose faith in the system. But the other side of it is to make sure that you have a medical professional sending it in to start with, so they're fully understanding of what you're saying. Because sometimes, I can't go down to the law courts and walk in and say, okay, yeah, I never done this, and start talking about law. I don't know law. And I don't know how to talk about Crohn's disease in a very meticulous manner that a doctor would. And they pick up on that, and they know that a common Joe filled it out, not a doctor. And they're really wanting the doctor to fill it out. They're very specific. And it shouldn't be that difficult, but you're right. Anything you try to get from government, there's more red tape, and you got to go through so much from, I got a hunting license to anything else. You might, if you take on your driver's license, you have a psychiatric condition, you could get a letter in the mail, and you got to go through a pile of paperwork and have an assessment. So, yes, everything with government is convoluted, but make it easier on yourself and have professionals do it. A doctor charges $50 to fill the form out. Don't try to do it yourself. Don't try to represent yourself in court. You wouldn't do that. So you'd absolutely need a professional. I really reinforce that. Like, it makes sense to have a doctor support you. My doctor would tell me straight out, with my wife in particular, she has Crohn's. She said, no, she won't qualify for disability. And I said, why? Because it's not severe enough. So she has to go further along so we can prove that it's severe and prolonged enough that it actually affects her work, and it affects her most of her life. Now, put that in quotes, most of her life. And this is how they work on these keywords, like most of her life.
Yeah, it's unnecessarily confusing and difficult. You've had the final word this morning, Rob. We've run out of time, but I appreciate yours.
And thanks, Paddy, for doing a great job on the show. We look forward to it every day.
I appreciate that very much. Stay in touch.
Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye-bye. All right, good show today. Big thanks to everyone who supports the program, and we will indeed pick up this conversation again tomorrow morning right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.